So you've kept a few cherry shrimp and neo Caridina, maybe a few different colours, and they've bred and prospered in your aquarium. And now you're ready to take the next step into the harder to keep Caridina species. If so, follow along and we'll look at equipment needed, setting up a tank, cycling a tank, introducing shrimp, the correct water parameters, onto breeding and issue resolution. We may not get this done in one video, but let's see how we get on. If you want to keep soft water Caridina species, we're talking specifically soft water here, Taiwan bees and bee shrimp, and all the variants, tigers, tatty bees, etc. We're not talking Sulawesi. So Sulawesi are a high pH, hard water shrimp. So we're specifically talking about soft water Caridina. In my opinion, there is no tap water in the whole of the United Kingdom that is good enough to keep soft water Caridina species on. With that in mind, we need a different water source. So that water source will come from an RO unit, a reverse osmosis unit. You can buy reverse osmosis water at most aquatic shops, and they're also in the UK outlets called spotless water. So a bit like a petrol station, you can go and fill up a can of pure water. The reason I'm adamant that you need reverse osmosis water is because you need to strip the water of everything in it, heavy metals, silicates, particles, you know, and everything else, phosphates, nitrates and everything else that comes in our tap water, and strip it back. And the only thing you want to put back in it is the minerals that you want to use. So if you're planning on buying and installing a reverse osmosis filter in your home, they start quite cheap. You can add on to them, and I'll explain in detail what they do. And you can literally just connect one to an outside tap if you wanted to. The proviso of using one at home is that you're on a mains pressure water system, and that mains pressure is pretty good. I think you need at least 2 bar. I could be wrong there, but I'll put something in the description about that. If you're on a gravity fed system at home, i.e. you've got a cold water storage tank, then you're likely going to need a booster pump in order to create the pressure for the reverse osmosis system to work. And what I'll do, I'll put a couple of pictures up now of some RO systems. I'll actually find some on Amazon and stuff, so I don't sell them, but I'd recommend certain places, and I'll put links to this stuff in the description. Now that we've established that we need to capture some water and collect reverse osmosis water, what we need to do then is look at what we do with that water. So we can't just put that directly into the tank. So things we'll need a way of mineralizing that, and it depends on your specific species of Caridina. So some of the tigers are a bit more tolerant, some of the really high-end, expensive hybrids need different parameters, but we're going to look at sort of a middle parameter. So there's various products on the market. Caridina, soft water Caridina by their nature, don't need any carbonate hardness in the water. They only need general hardness. So you'll hear terms spoke about like GH and KH, which is general hardness and carbonate hardness, and these are important. They're important for neos, but you may have kept neos on tap water and not really understood this. So carbonate hardness are the amounts of bicarbonates in the water. Carbonate hardness by its nature buffers the pH, so KH will help you to buffer a pH. Caridina don't like any KH at all, 0 to 1, you know, 1 being max. So, and they tend to like a general hardness, which is the the hardness or softness of the water are between 4 and 6. So we're going to aim for 5 in this series. We're going to aim for a general hardness of 5, and we're going to aim for a carbonate hardness of 0. Now you may be thinking, he's just told me that KH buffers pH, and we're not going to have any KH, so how are we going to buffer our pH? That brings us on to our next section, which is active soils, active substrates. An active substrate is typically a soil, so a soil that's primarily used on the bottom of a tank. There are other ways to use it, but a soil that will buffer the pH. So the composition of the soil is created in such a way that the soil becomes your buffer, so you don't need any KH, typically with humic and fulvic acids and various earth minerals and stuff like that. So within these active soils, different soils will give you a different pH, and this is really important when you're selecting what type of Caridina you want to keep. So I keep tiger shrimp, and I keep my tiger shrimp at around 6.3, 6.4 pH, but I also keep my fancy tigers, and my fancy tigers, so these are a cross, they're a hybrid shrimp. My fancy tigers I keep at pH 5.5, and there's a variety, so I use different soils for different purposes, and dependent on what you want to keep first, we'll talk about soils. I'll put some soils up next, and within those soils I'll put the pHs that I think, or I know, or that my experience has said that soil gives me a certain pH. Now that we've got the awkward bit of the reverse osmosis and soils out the way, let's talk about tank size. So for Caridina, I'd recommend a minimum of 10 gallon or 50 litres. I'd recommend this because they're easier to maintain and keep the environment stable than a 25 litre, for argument's sake. I'd go bigger than that if I had the room. Most of my tanks are 25 litre. I'll explain why. Most of my tanks are 25 litre and 50 litre, but the majority are 50 litre or 45, 50 litre. The reason I've got the 25 litres is literally just to do little breeding projects with, or very small colonies, before I move them into bigger tanks. So what we need to do next is remineralise the water that we've collected, our RO water. There are a few proprietary products on the market. I only stock a couple. So I stock Qualdrop GH plus LC. The LC stands for low conductivity. And I also stock GH plus 1, specifically designed for tiger species of Caridina. Both of these are liquids. I'll show some pictures in a second. Both of these are liquids, and they come with a syringe, so they're very easy to dose. You dose based on the instructions, so many mil per 5 or 10 litres gives you 1 degree carbonate hardness, etc. You can use a TDS pen to sort of measure that and then mix to that TDS, but you don't have to. You don't necessarily need a TDS pen to keep Caridina, as long as you do your water changes and you mix your water to the required parameters based on the instructions. That'll be fine. As you progress, you may want to invest in a TDS pen. Other things on the market are maybe salty shrimp, GH plus for B shrimp, etc. There are a few different ones on the market. If I can find some pictures, I'll put them up. The two that I stock are both liquid based, and they're both Qualdrop, and I use them. Filtration methods for Caridina shrimp. I'm going to recommend 4 different types of filtration. The types of filtration that I'm going to recommend are all air driven, so they're all driven by a pump. You don't need heavy flow in a Caridina aquarium. So the first one is the sponge filter. I'll put pictures of these up. The first one is a sponge filter, or a double sponge filter. The second one is an undergravel filter box. So this is what's often referred to as an Asian style UGF undergravel filter. And the undergravel filter, you put soil into the filter. So instead of it just sitting at the bottom, you've actually got water passing through the soil, and the benefits of that mean that you can take that out and change it as you need to, but also you get the most out of the soil because the water's constantly in contact with it rather than it just sitting on the bottom. Matten filters and Hamburg Matten towers. So I'll put pictures of all of these up with a little description of what each one does and the pros and cons. Once we've mixed our reverse osmosis water, ideally in a bucket of some description, we're going to set up a tank. So we need to add some soil. The filtration method that we've chosen, and then add a bacterial source. So whether this is a leaching soil or a non-leaching soil, if it's a non-leaching, you can add ammonia. I personally don't, because I believe that the bioload from shrimp is so low anyway, as long as you're adding bacteria as you sort of go through your water changes, and we'll cover this further down the line. Some proprietary ones that are on the market then. So we've got PS Bacter from Quoldrop. This is a photosynthetic bacteria. I believe this helps to grow algae and greenwall. There's Biobacter, and there's various different bacters. There's Milli1 as an example. And the one that I've been testing and I will be using for the purposes of this video is Shrimp's Affair setup powder, or dead shrimp powder as it's often referred to, just because this creates a lovely bed of biofilm in a tank. So you can add this sort of in after your water changes and stuff, but I'm using this to set the tank off. If you managed to stick with it this long and you're still here, now we're over the main components. I'm just going to recap. So we spoke about the need for reverse osmosis water. We've spoke about various soils and what each one of those do. We've spoke about filtration that you can use. We've spoken about bacters, and we've spoken about remineralizing that RO water. So stay tuned for part 2. Make sure you're subscribed and you've got the bell notification on, because in part 2 we're going to put all that together. We'll mix up some water, we'll set up a tank, we'll put some bacter in, we'll use some of the soil, we'll use one of the chosen methods of filtration that I've chose to use right the way through to setting up that tank, cycling that tank, getting shrimp in that tank, and then we'll look at sort of any issues that come post that. So just make sure you're subscribed and you have the bell notifications on. If you've enjoyed this, leave a comment, ask us a question, hit the like button, share the video, because all this helps us to grow and get this beautiful hobby out to a much, much wider audience. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care until next time. Keep an eye out for part 2 to this video.